Hey guys, it has been a couple of weeks and I've needed that time absolutely to recover from the crazy fall that we've been having, you know, one thing after another, and the latest thing that happened is hosting the SweetGeorgia first ever retreat, the Escape with SweetGeorgia Retreat. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a space where we come and we talk every Friday about making things, about making time to make things, and how important it is to find time to do those things that you love to do. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the thing that just happened recently. And that thing, that event, was our Escape with SweetGeorgia Retreat. The whole goal of this retreat was to help encourage people to also take the time, you know, to carve out that time and escape from the realities of life, to go to this place in the woods in, you know, near Whistler at Brew Creek, and to enjoy each other's company for a weekend, spend some time knitting, spend some time playing with fiber arts equipment and tools and all of these kinds of things. All of that was wonderful. Now, one of the things that actually came out of this event that I've been thinking a lot about is that the last time that I posted a video, it was a 2-minute video encouraging you guys to go check out this pilot for a series that we're hoping will get made, and it's called Swatched. And so the pilot is sharing one story of a knitwear designer, Angela Tong. And so her story about how she got started and how she made knitting into her career, and how crafting and weaving and all of these things is part of her career. And that is her story. And many people have commented about how wonderful it is to hear her story, to hear how she came up and how she created a life in craft. And then this amazing thing happened at the retreat. So this is the first time that we've ever hosted a retreat, and we were very concerned about making the event not too overscheduled. We really wanted to have like an easygoing, casual, like lots of downtime for people to enjoy making and just hanging out together. And so the first evening for the activity, what we decided was we were just going to do a very simple show and tell. So if you've ever been to a guild meeting or a knitting meetup or whatever, show and tell is basically you stand up and you show this thing that you made and you say a couple words about it. Now with our show and tell, we wanted to encourage people to bring maybe like the project that they're most proud of, or they could bring the project that they're currently working on, or they could bring a project that was their massive mistake, which is what I brought. I brought a mistake that I made probably about 14 years ago. Now, it started off the evening with Bridget. Bridget told the first story. She brought a piece of cloth that is a traditional, it's a traditional cloth that is part of their folk costume for her culture and her village back in Estonia. And so Bridget told this story about this piece of cloth and how important this piece of cloth is to her, and how it represented her family and her ancestors and her culture and her genealogy, and ultimately this piece of cloth represented her identity in a lot of ways. And she also brought a follow-up footnote piece of cloth, and it was the sampler that she had woven when Bridget and I met for the first time, which is when I was teaching weaving lessons at our original studio, and Bridget came in as a student, and that's how we actually met. And she brought this sampler, and her sampler was to show her intention that one day, someday, she would like to be able to weave cloth that is something that is part of her traditional culture and family. And so she started off the conversation, and she was sharing the story, and she was a little bit in tears, and I was a little bit in tears, and there was a bunch of, it was just everybody was getting very emotional. And then we just went around the room, just in one big long zigzag all the way around the room. And everybody stood up and told a story about cloth, about something that they had made, and about the stories that were attached to that cloth. And the stories that came out of that evening were incredibly powerful, incredibly poignant. There was just a lot of, it was quite emotional actually to listen to everyone's stories and about how these pieces of cloth related to their lives, related to their identity, related to their family. There's stories about people knitting to express joy, knitting to express love for someone else by giving gifts to someone else, knitting to process grief of finishing projects that, you know, family members had started but never finished. And there was just so many stories. And so I thought about how we sometimes put on a pedestal people who seem to be part of the knitterati and how their stories are really important or big or powerful. But in fact, all of our stories are really powerful. Like everything that everyone had to say was incredibly beautiful and incredibly touching. And I think that that is my greatest takeaway from the entire weekend, was just that all of these individuals were so special, and it was such, it sounds so cliche, but it was like, it was a very magical thing to have happened, to have all of these people together in the same room, sharing their projects, sharing their love of making things. And so that was fantastic. Of course, there were other amazing and fantastic situations, like Amy doing her first ever steeking project. She cut her sweater right at the retreat, and you know, people learning how to dye for the very first time, people who had never touched a loom before, people who all of a sudden fell in love with like an 8-shaft loom. They'd never touched a loom before. There's all sorts of things like that that happened that were very, very nice and wonderful. So I'm so thankful that we had the opportunity to host this event. It was fun. So thank you so much to everyone who joined the retreat, who you guys were brave enough to join us on this big experiment and this grand adventure to see what would happen with a retreat type event. So thank you guys so much for coming. If any of you guys are ever interested in joining us for an event like this, please do just get on our email list so that way we can let you know when something like this happens. It might not be an annual thing, but it's something that we really enjoyed putting together and we really enjoyed being at. So I can imagine that there are going to be more events like this sometime in the future. Now, out of this entire weekend, I don't think I really got that much stuff done. I did do a lot of spinning. I did do some spinning on an e-spinner, but I brought, again, the wrong knitting project. I brought a sweater that I just started, and I'll show you the yarn that it's out of. So these are a few of the skeins of the yarn that I'm going to be working with. This is the Mohair Silk DK yarn, and it's in one of the fall colorways. This fall colorway happens to be called Arbutus. I love this colorway. Arbutus trees are very prevalent in and around Vancouver. They're cool looking trees. They're kind of smooth, but at the same time the bark peels off and you can see under layers, and when the bark peels off it's like curled, and the bark is warm red. It's warm reddish brown, and then underneath there'll be layers of grayish green and all sorts of things like that. And so this colorway really, to me, it says Arbutus to me, and so I love it, and I'm making a sweater out of it right now. So the sweater that I started is called the Sailing Sweater. It's by Becky Paul. She does Shirley Bryan yarn. I've talked about this before. I have started the sweater, and you can see that that's all that I've done so far. Now this sweater is lace, but it's lace on both sides, so there's no resting rows. You're basically making yarn overs on both sides. So you do have to keep track of what's going on. You have to pay attention. And so that's part of the reason why I didn't do a ton of knitting at the retreat, because it required too much concentration. I did knit, with the needle size that was recommended in the pattern, but then decided to do a quasi gauge swatch because Tabitha told me I should. And so after doing the gauge swatch, I decided that my fabric was a little bit too loose and it might still block out and drape and get more soggy. So I decided to rip the whole thing out and restart with a smaller needle size. So you can see this is the beginning of my sweater, and it is going to be knit side to side. So it's basically like this is the sleeve, and then you keep knitting, and then all the way around to the other side. And it makes kind of like, she says, the designer's saying it's kind of like half poncho, half sweater, which sounds great to me. Just something cozy that you can just put on top. So that is the knitting that I brought and didn't really work on. But I almost forgot to show you that this is the sweater that I finished. Ta-da! This is the Beekeeper sweater that I was working on. This is the Olive Knits Marie Green Beekeeper sweater. One of the things that somebody said to me, I wore this on the first night when we were doing the show and tell at the retreat. Somebody immediately said to me, and they said, "Oh, are you going to add buttons to it?" And then all of a sudden I had a moment of panic where I realized, did I forget to make buttonholes on this cardigan? Like, I just made button bands on, well, actually I just made 2 front bands. I didn't actually make button bands. I didn't make any holes for buttons to go in. And I have a feeling the pattern didn't specify buttons. I think it's meant to be worn open. But for a moment there, I had a little bit of panic. I was like, oh my gosh, did I read the instructions wrong? It's very possible. But in any case, I don't think it needs buttons. I'm going to leave it open, and it feels great. It took forever. It feels like it took forever to finish these sleeves. The sleeves are kind of a little bit short. I mean, they could have been longer, but I kind of wanted them to be 3/4 length. I think it needs to be about there. So yeah, they might seem like they're a little bit short, but I'm rolling them up. That's why. And yeah, I still have a tail to weave in. Now for the entire weekend, what I did do was I led the dyeing studios. So the idea was that we were gonna have a Saturday morning session, Saturday afternoon session, and Sunday morning session where people could come, and we had all the pre-mixed dyes ready for people to go. And we had all of the yarns and everything available for people to just dive in and do their own dyeing. And every single time we do a dye workshop, there always is leftover dye at the end of the day. And so this is the thing that's become sort of a tradition for me, is that at every time that I teach a dyeing workshop, I come home with leftovers. Leftover dye that has been exhausted on yarn or fiber. So this time I have a whole bunch of fiber that I exhausted. I used a whole bunch of fiber to basically dye mop is the term that we coined, but basically just to throw in a pile of fiber to just capture any excess dye that's lying around, capture all of the leftover dye. So one of the first things I did was to basically just, what I do is I take the fiber and I squish it up into a pan and then pour the leftover dye on top, cook it, and then it sets. So that is one of the things that came out of that. It's kind of like, it's very random. So this one's very random. But then the next couple of bundles, I looked at the leftover dye that was available, and I started to categorize it into like colors. And so what I did was I took 3 little bundles of 50 grams. Each of these bundles is superwash BFL. And what I did was I made 3 little bundles that are slightly different colors. So this bundle is leftover dye that's kind of like blues and greens and teals and things like that. The next one is, this is kind of like browns and golds and plums and greens also. So this one is the second one. And the third one is this one. It's like gold and brown and ginger and cranberry and those kinds of colors. So 50 grams, 50 grams, and 50 grams. So the reason why I decided to do this is because I've still been thinking about making that night shift cowl, that one with the the one that looks like it's made out of hand spun, but it's made out of spin cycle. And I've been wanting to do it with my own hand spun, but I haven't really liked any of the hand spun that I actually have on hand. So with this leftovers, 50 grams, 50 grams, 50 grams, I'm gonna spin 3 skeins, and then each of these skeins I'm going to knit up together to make that night shift. Is it called the shift? The shift cowl. That's what these things are destined for. Now, you can see that there's a lot of white spots in here, and this is because I basically wanted to do a little bit of an experiment. And so when we provided the fiber to the students, the fiber was all braided. So it's just an undyed chunk of fiber that's braided. And I just basically took the braid and dunked it into into the dye. So I didn't undo it or like let it spread out or anything like that. And so because it was left in a braided format and I let it almost dry in a braided format, basically you can see that there's a lot of spots of resist. It worked out really cool actually. So very excited about that. So that turned out really kind of cool, and I am super looking forward to seeing the hand spun that is going to come out of this. So the retreat was fantastic. I absolutely have to thank our team at SweetGeorgia for helping to organize it. It was a crazy amount of work. And I don't think that we realized how much it was going to be until we started to do it, until we started to like actually have to rent a van to bring all the equipment up to Whistler. All of that stuff happened in the last few days before the event. And yeah, there was a lot of looms in my house the week before the event. I think I had to warp 3 or 4 looms from scratch to get them out to the retreat. And it was fantastic to do the event, and I love that location. I love that Brew Creek location. The food is amazing, the view is amazing, we had amazing and incredible weather. I managed on the very last day, because we had daylight savings, we had an extra hour, so I woke up and pretty much immediately went and did a little walk around the entire area, the entire sort of forest area that the Brew Creek Lodge is set upon. And you know, walking over this whole thing, it's kind of like a hiking trail actually. It was not really a walk, it was more like a hike. And got to the top of it, and there was a little park bench at the very top where you could just sit and look out into the forest, and it was so incredibly quiet and peaceful and wonderful. It was just, I was very grateful to have a few moments to have that quiet. And yeah, it was absolutely wonderful, and I look forward to the opportunity when we can do that again. And also a big thank you to the facilitators for each one of our studios. We had Tabitha, who came in all the way from Tennessee for this, and then also Amanda, who led the weaving one, and Katrina, who led the spinning studio. And so each of these ladies, they have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in these areas, so I'm really glad that the retreat participants had an opportunity to enjoy those studios together with them. So thank you. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. It's basically a big giant recap of what happened over the weekend. I wanted to share some clips and some behind the scenes of what we were doing at the studio and what we were doing at Brew Creek. So thank you guys so much for watching. I would love to hear from you guys if this is the kind of event that you would like to participate in the future. And if you have any suggestions about what you feel like would be an ideal schedule of events, like if you want more workshops, do you want the scheduled activities, or if you like more downtime in your ideal retreat, what would you like to do and spend time doing? That's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this, please do hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more episodes like this, please do hit subscribe. We come here every Friday and I talk about spinning and knitting and weaving and dyeing and so many things about the fiber arts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.